Hello and welcome to Horticulture. Today I'm going to regale you with tales from the garden. So let's start with the day that I went with someone else to pull reeds out of the river. I came round to his place because he lived near the river, and he said, it's okay, I've got some waders for us both. I borrowed them from the fishing club. So off we went. He said, here you are, try these ones. So I put them on. Meanwhile he was putting his pair on, and I looked over at him. I couldn't help laughing. I mean, he really looked like someone in frog's legs. It was so funny. But what was even funnier was that his were too small for him and mine were too big. Meanwhile, there was another person sat on the settee, and they were starting to laugh quite a bit by this time. So anyway, so we decided that maybe we should swap, because and that way we might balance out a bit more. So we swapped over, and I looked at him and I thought, you look so funny. Meanwhile, the person on the settee was just in hysterics, rolling about laughing, and she had two of us to laugh at. Meanwhile, he's looking at me, laughing his head off because I look so daft and like a human frog, but in the wrong size waders. And I'm looking at him, laughing my head off because he's looking like a frog, but in the wrong size waders. And I think we laughed for about half an hour, literally. I don't think we could stop laughing. It was awful. But a good memory. I've never laughed as much as I laughed that morning. Pulling the reeds up was not really very interesting at all, and certainly for me, seeing as I can't swim and I've got a bit of a fear of water, it wasn't quite the nicest job in the world, but we did it and we got paid and we had a good laugh, so it was okay. If you've spent all your life knowing plants, it's quite funny when you come across people who've no idea about plants. Many years ago I went and did a job, and the lady showed me around the garden and told me what she wanted doing, and then she pointed to a plant that had big flat flower heads with many flowers on, and she said, oh, I ought to make some elderflower wine. And I looked back at her and I said, yeah, it is that time, but I wouldn't do it with this. This is a climbing hydrangea. Sometimes you get a warning that a job isn't going to go as well as you'd like. One time I turned up at a garden, turned up with someone else. It was our first day, and we began. We knew what we were doing, so we started, and then a lady came out of the house and said, oh, where's my statue? And obviously I had no idea what she was talking about. I was like, what statue? She said, well, that one there, where that space is that you're standing next to. And I'm like, oh, there was nothing here when I came here. And then I noticed there was a footprint, so I quickly, while she was watching, put my foot next to it to prove that it was a different size to my foot, and indeed was a different footprint. Anyway, a bit later on we found the plants that were in this statue and urn thrown in the hedge up the road. So yeah, that didn't really bode well. And then another few visits later, and the bloke I was working with was off on the tractor, and the next thing is I hear a massive bang and see him running away from it as the the tractor exploded in some way. And he said he'd already told the bloke, who our client, that it needed servicing and needed looking at. Anyway, I think that was the end of us being there, which was a bit disappointing, but that's how some things go. Some things just don't work out with people. Now, what many people probably don't know, or maybe they do this to themselves, but when you're working, sometimes you're working outside, you're working on trees, you're working plants, and you actually talk to them. And there was one day when I was with someone else, we were both pruning an orchard, and I was talking to a tree and I was saying, I'm going to cut you next and I'll leave you because you've got some nice fruit buds on, and things like that. And then I stopped for a moment and I listened, and the bloke I was working with, a few trees away, I could hear him doing the same thing, talking to the tree. Another job I did many years ago, I chatted to the bloke on the phone and I agreed to do the work, and he gave me directions to the place. Down here, up down the hill, turn right, and then when you come to the first garages, it's the next one. So off I go. I get to the garage. It's the next one. So I start working. And occasionally I looked up towards the house and I could see a woman in there moving about. And then about an hour later, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, I hear a voice from the next garden say, "Is that you? Come to do the garden?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "You're in the wrong garden." So I'd done 2 hours in somebody's garden for free. They never paid me, they never said thanks, and they didn't come out and say, "What are you doing in my garden?" Which I found quite odd. Anyway, that job went wrong. It's quite interesting how when you go for a job, sometimes you get warning signs that they're not going to go well, and this didn't. Another time I was doing an orchard with some other people, and I was up on this ladder, and there's a bloke next to me up on another ladder, and I was sawing away and we were chatting away, and then I suddenly realised that I was sawing the bit of the wood, the bit of the branch that his ladder was resting against. Luckily I realised in time before I cut all the way through it, and off he went. Well, I'm just about to cut this dogwood down a bit, and I'm reminded of one time I was here and I was cutting the screen stemmed one. And of course it's too thick to actually get it all easily. So I was reaching in, then all of a sudden I realised that I'd reached in too far, that I couldn't actually push myself back up again. Luckily, I was here with someone else, and they heard this voice go, "Help! Help! I'm in the dogwood!" And they just had to come and pull me back again. But I mean, if you can see, that's quite a long way to reach in the middle of that. That still makes me chuckle today. And I'll leave you with this one. Now, if you're familiar with how a mower works, you'll know they have two levers. One for the engine start and cut off, and one for the drive. Now, before you think that I just mow lawns, that's absolutely not true. I mow rough areas like this, and especially this area down there. As you see, this area is on a bit of a slope and involves going round lots of shrub bases and having low hanging branches to manoeuvre around. Some of these have been cut off so you can't actually see them, but you know, they're below head height. So instead of using a mower normally, you have to use it in a way that it wasn't thought about when it was designed, like with one hand, for example, leant against your legs so it doesn't roll off down the slope, and all kinds of things that just to get it cut. Now this is the mower that belongs to this story. So if you're on a slope and there are loads of shrubs and trees, various little plants that you've got to miss, you can't just go up and down in a normal way as you would if you're, say, mowing this meadow, for example. So what you end up doing, and when I said leaning it against me, I meant leaning the handles against me, not that I don't have my feet anywhere near the cutting bed. Yeah, that doesn't even bear thinking about. So often you're gripping both handles with one hand because you can't get two in, because there's branches in the way, branches in your face, in your shoulders, in your back, and it's not a simple job. And then the mower, self-propelled doesn't necessarily mean drives itself. So on a slope, going up a slope, it doesn't really, it just gives that extra bit, but also you have to kind of let the clutch in and out to just let it roll back on the slopes if you're going up into little bits. So very often you're using one hand, but of course a heavy mower on a slope and it's uneven ground, it can get stuck. And this one particular day, it did indeed do something very strange. And the next thing I know, I let the clutch out, I closed the clutch again. Well, I let the clutch out, something happened anyway to force my hand to close the clutch. Close the two handles together. So it was in drive and cut mode. But at the same time, I'd managed to catch myself in the vernacular, if you know what I mean. But I also couldn't let go because I was stuck under this branch and I had it together, so it was wheel spinning on the spot, gripping an unpleasantness, as it were. Anyway, I had to do something. I can't even remember how I got out of it, but you know, bizarre gardening accidents, and we all know what happened to the drummer of Spinal Tap, don't we? Thanks for watching. See you next time. Ta-da.